Do you recall times when you have stepped into a room and you kind of sense that there's something is wrong? Or have you ever talked to someone and it feels a little bit off? Do you recall times when you just wake up in the morning, you have this sense about something or someone, but it's just so vague and you literally cannot figure out what is going on? I just really want to tell you that you may have the gift of discernment, which can easily be mistaken for anxiety or fear, or it can cause anxiety or fear. Before this gets all confusing, let's talk about what discernment really is. It is the ability to understand things with insight and good judgment, to distinguish between right and wrong, truth and falsehood, a deep understanding by spiritual insight, in other words, intuition, to navigate complex situations and choices. The good news is discernment is a gift of the Holy Spirit. It helps us align our will and choices according to God. I really want to emphasize that this is a gift because in my experience, when I was really young, I felt the Spirit of God. I felt Jesus, but I didn't really know of the knowledge, but I felt His presence. If I did not have this gift, I don't think I would ever become saved. I am very well aware of the Spirit of God in my presence. And this is a really good thing. We can feel the goodness of God. We can feel the good spirits. This is awareness and sensitivity to God's voice. Another thing is that it makes us a really good friend. Anyone can look at anybody and see that person, but we have to take it a step higher, which is what we call spiritually, to really know and feel the intentions and the feelings of that person. It makes us a good friend because we can literally feel what they feel. In that case, we are really sympathetic with them. We are in deep compassion with them. And that is what makes a good friend. It helps us not to unrighteously judge or gossip, because when we do so, we feel that it's really wrong and we feel really convicted and immediately guilty. And I have been through that. I felt that, and it's just like immediate remorse. And I really appreciate that because it helps me become a really good disciple of God. I really want to walk in His light, and I think this gift is really amazing. And if you have this gift too, I want you to know that it is a gift, it is a blessing, and you can walk in it in light, and you can be the light to somebody else. And understanding people's feelings and struggles and stuff, it can really show God's glory through you. And here is another side of that. This gift can feel heavy if we don't lay it back down at Jesus' feet. In the presence of the spirits of the evil one, it can be really hard to handle and it can feel really heavy. This is where it can easily turn into anxiety and fear. There are times when we see the spirit of the devil work, but it is unseen or widely accepted in the physical world because the world says it's okay, but then our heart that is aligned with the teaching of God says otherwise. It can really yank us. These are times when we can feel alone or crazy, or that we can never find immediate relief or long-lasting relief, because this isn't really something that you can just openly talk about with anyone, because you don't really have a way to really explain it without proof. For example, some basic examples, you are having lunch with a friend, and the friend has a new friend, and you're just, getting to know one another. It's an exciting moment. You get to meet someone new and possibly make friends, but then you're having this time together, but then you realize that something is really off. You sense insecurity, you sense judgment, you sense pride, you sense selfishness. And this is not something that you can just say to your friend or really to anybody, because that's gossip, or it can feel like you're judging them unrighteously. Another thing is that you have this hunches that something will happen, or if you just imagined it all. Do you recall these times when these things would happen and you're just sitting there like, what is going on? Am I dreaming, having a nightmare, something? So all of these things in a very short summary is seen and heard in the spiritual realm and will not be seen by the majority in the physical world. This is what being spiritually sensitive is like. We see both the good and the evil spirits. And this was my struggle for the longest time. This gave me extreme anxiety, and it really fed on my fears. From the examples I mentioned, how do you just kind of explain this to somebody? So I've never said anything, and I've always kept it hidden. And the times where I would say something, it would really not be great. It was not great. So I have learned not to say anything. And sometimes I would just go into my room during gatherings to kind of just get a break from it. I would hide out for an hour or an hour and a half without seeming like something is really wrong, because you still have to be present and be available. I would be depressed because the feelings I felt were not my feelings, but I made it into my feelings. Since you feel what people feel, and you're carrying that, you're carrying that burden. Sharing is different. You have sympathy for them, you understand them, but this type, you're carrying it because it's just like their life is yours. And back then, I didn't know how to separate my feelings from theirs. So I was just kind of like really stuck in this middle ground. And this made me into a secretive person who hid all of my feelings. I want to say more than 10 years, I struggled with this. But with God, everything is possible. God is trustworthy. I knew He was faithful. So I asked Him. One day I was just like, show me something. Show me what I'm missing. Show me what I'm doing wrong. Show me what I am not getting. Because I know there's an answer to this that I'm not grasping. And when you pray these things to God and you convey your feelings and your burdens to Him, He will show you. He showed me, and I know He will show you. So for a long time, I was going through all of these things, but I have never brought it to God. I have never brought these things to Him. I did not seek Him first. He was always like a last resort. And I never understood why God made me sensitive like this. And I was angry with Him for a while. While I was angry, I was not seeking Him either. So no wonder why I was stuck in the middle. So there are two things that He showed me. The first was about the prophet Jeremiah. There are two things that you could do. This first one, for imminent dangers, there are going to happen, like it's going to happen soon. You are supposed to say something, because if it includes danger or possible death, you must say something. And God spoke to Jeremiah to warn the people of Israel to change their ways, or they're gonna be in destruction, like literal destruction. The Israelites were supposed to be given to the hands of the Babylonians because the Israelites were wicked, and God used Jeremiah to warn them of their ways. And I'm pretty sure they've been warned a long time before then. Finally, with Jeremiah, this is your last chance. So Jeremiah, while he did refuse to walk in what God has called him to do, and he tried to not do it, but eventually he understood what God was trying to tell him, and he walked in it, and he spoke what he spoke to his people because of what's going to happen. And this is the suffering of following God. Jeremiah himself was rebuked by his own family and friends. He probably had like one or two, or I don't even know, of people that supported him and believed him, but in the majority, nobody did. And he was suffering because of that. It's really saddening. It definitely tugs at the heart. But, we can look to Jeremiah's life. Even though we feel the suffering on this earth, it is not forever. It's only temporary. This world is not the promised land. This is not yet the kingdom in its full fruition. The Lord told Jeremiah not to marry and not to have children. And at the time, he didn't understand that. He's like, why not me? I follow your word. I'm walking with you. I'm doing what you're telling me to do. But he tells him not to marry and to not have children. He'd never experienced that. And finally, he understood that if he did have a wife and children, and he would be in extreme anguish because his wife and children would probably be carried off by the Babylonians and become their slaves, or they would die or something. So while we do not understand why God has put us in certain positions or why we have the gifts that we do, he has knowledge of everything from beginning to end. God has that knowledge. And we have to trust that God is powerful, and we trust in him, and that he knows more than we do. And the last thing that Prophet Jeremiah taught me about his life is that we don't have to feel guilty or afraid to fight for the Lord and his kingdom. It gives me peace that the rebellion of God's people is not because of our doing or lack of doing, because ultimately it is their choice to follow the Lord or not. So we don't have to be afraid to speak life. We don't have to be afraid to fight for his kingdom. Just like if you see a kid about to run off on the road and you see a car coming, you're gonna yell at them, get out of the way, and you're gonna be loud and you're gonna seem like you're gonna scare people. Sometimes that's what you gotta do when there's immediate danger. There is a second way to intercede for the people, and this reminds me of Samuel. So right now I have been doing like Bible studies from the front of the book all the way to the back, and I'm doing it again, and it's taking me a long time. I'm really in the book of Samuel for like the past month or so, and I have no idea why it's taking me a long time, but now I feel that I'm here because God doesn't want me to forget about Samuel. He is the last judge of Israel before the kingship began with Saul, David, and Solomon. So here is this guy named Samuel, who was called the greatest intercessor next to Moses. His life really showed me that we can intercede for the people through prayer, through connection, through just time alone with God, speaking for your family or friends and just interceding for them, bringing them up to God. So Moses, he defended his sister Miriam got leprosy because she openly mocked Moses and was showing to the people that she didn't trust God's judgment. Instead of Moses being offended at the things she said, because she was bringing up things like Moses married a person outside of God's people. He married a Gentile pretty much. And the law of God was not to do that. Moses' wife's dad is a strong follower of God. He had so much faith, he had so much wisdom. And these were Gentiles. They were not getting that God's people are just people who are yearning for God. It doesn't have anything to do with blood or whatnot and whose ancestors you have. Instead of Moses being offended at what his sister said, it was a straight accusation and it probably made him look bad. He immediately defended her. He prayed for her. He interceded for her to God. That is amazing, and that is something that really opened up my eyes. Moses also went up the mountain the second time after he came back down and then broke tablets because people were worshiping a false god. And he went back up to the mountain to intercede for all these people. With Samuel, this is in the first book of Samuel, chapter 12, 23 to 25. This is Samuel's intercession. Moreover, as for me, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord in ceasing to pray for you. But I will teach you the good and the right way. Only fear the Lord and serve him in truth with all your heart. For consider what great things he has done for you. But if you still do wickedly, you shall be swept away, both you and your king. A little tough to hear too, because in this day and age, we're like, nobody wants to be convicted. Nobody wants to hear the truth. But here, Samuel, he's saying to them, he's going to keep praying for them. He's going to keep interceding for them. But he's also speaking life to them. So when I'm reading this, Samuel is speaking out of love to these people. He's being truthful, but also not in a bad way. He's warning them, but then he's also telling them that he prays for them. And you can't really pray for someone out of hate. You pray for someone because you love them. You pray for people because you have this compassion for them. Only God knows what's in your heart. If you are bringing all of this to God, it shows your humility. It shows how much you trust God, that he knows what he's doing, and you're going to keep bringing it up to him and laying it down at his feet. Can you imagine if Samuel or Moses just held everything in their heart and just keeping it, and they're carrying all these burdens from everyone? And what if they never brought it to God? What the heck would happen? Oh my goodness, anxiety, fear, all of those things. You have to keep bringing it up to God. You have to keep laying it back down at his feet, because he's the only one that can carry it. They were being honest with what they needed to do or say, but they prayed for the people. And this is something that all of us with this gift must do, because we cannot be stuck in the middle. So Moses and Samuel, they called on the Lord first. Even the psalmist David wrote about them. In Psalms chapter 99 verse 6, Moses and Aaron were among his priests, and Samuel was among those who called upon his name. They called upon the Lord, and he answered them. Sometimes God gives us a name. He wants us to connect with them, or to reconnect with them, for them to know that God sees them. Because once you talk, it's slowly going to come up, and it does reveal itself. And they eventually will realize, whoa, you know what? I was going through this struggle for a while, and then you showed up. So it makes them feel like God sees them. God will use you as a vessel to relay his message to that person. But can you imagine if you didn't walk in that? What could have happened? What would have not happened? But when you do step in it, and you know God is telling you to do this, you will start to see these revelations like, oh my God. To us, we're just kind of reaching out to them because they've been on our mind, and we don't really know why. But to them, it's much higher than that. It's much, oh my gosh, it's a much more of a blessing to them. I have personally gone through these experiences myself. I was going through a whole bunch of stuff, and all of a sudden God just started showing people one by one consecutively, and I'm just like, you know what? This has to be God. This is not by chance. It was just weird. So imagine when you are that someone who's relaying that message to them. So I'm going to give you an example. A friend of mine, her name kept popping up in my head. It just kept showing up, and her name was just embedded in my mind day after day after day after day. And it was finally like a week or so. And it's insane because I waited that long. That's how much like I didn't really connect it. But when it just kept staying there, I reached out to her. I was like, hey, how are you doing? The next thing I said was, hey, want to do a Bible plan with me? And she's a new mama, adjusting to her new role in life. And I was just like, and the first thing she said was, sure. I was just like, oh my gosh. Like, I was not expecting that. So we do this Bible plan. We completely finish it. And you know how in the YouVersion Bible plans, you can talk about the day. In one of them, she said that she was praying about getting back with God, or growing closer to God, and she just didn't know how. And that the Bible plan itself was her answer prayer. And when I read that, I was like, whoa. I was just taken aback because I started feeling immensely the Spirit of God just telling me that's what I wanted you to do. And even just right now, I'm getting like huge chills because in the simplest things, in the most subtlest ways, God works wonders, like gushing river type of wonders. James chapter 1 verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. Oftentimes, God has put a name in my mind, and it would cause me great anxiety because this person is not a friend of mine. I guess you could literally say an enemy or an accuser. And my first instinct is like, no, this is the flesh talking. And you will greatly see when you're walking in the flesh, because as soon as you realize, you are greatly convicted. So when I realized what God is doing, he wanted me to show the love of Christ by loving your enemies. And the greatest thing you could do for your enemy is to pray for them, to intercede for them, to bring them back to God. If someone doesn't love someone, they will not spend time for them, let alone pray for them. God sees what you do in secret. He sees your heart when you're doing this. So here is where the discernment comes. So if this person, if they follow the Lord, then you know that they have a humility to at least listen. They don't have to do what you're saying, but to just listen and understand and seek out God themselves. But there are some people who, whatever you say, they will not hear. They will be greatly offended. And it just falls on deaf ears, So in this case, God instead asks you to pray for them, because how do you know who prays for them? How do you know there's another person that's doing this for them? We often say that prayers are powerful. We know, but do we really believe it? So while a conversation with them will not do anything and would probably go downhill, this is a great reminder for us to intercede for them in prayer. We must measure what comes out of relaying the message. And we know that there are people who say they believe in God and all the things that God say, and they don't really show the fruits of the Spirit in their life. So this is an indication. So in this case, you just bring it to God, because we can't hold it in, because it's frustrating. Something is wrong. That they are not walking in the Spirit of the Lord. But at the same time, your words mean absolutely nothing, because maybe you mean nothing to them. And in this case, while we feel the suffering, We can't hold it in. We cannot stay in the middle. And I keep bringing this up because I know what staying in the middle leads to. And it's not the way of God. While we're here stuck in the suffering when we can't do anything, that's absolutely false, because we can do something. We bring it back to God. Hey, God, I have this turmoil in my heart and I don't know what to do with it. So I'm just going to give it to you. You are the one who knows how to weave things into motion. You are the one that softens the heart of the people. You know their hearts. And I know your voice impacts them. You can't do anything, but you know God can. And praying for them starts to give you comfort and starts to give you peace. And you start to let go of the burdens. And we finally understand what love our enemies mean. Matthew chapter 5, verse 44. But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Man, these words, it just like pierces through my heart. Throughout the Old Testament and New, we often see many people always act on behalf of one another. We see it in Moses, we see it in Samuel, we see it in Jeremiah. From beginning to now, we have seen that in history, and we have seen how God works through that. Even now, pastors and the congregation of the church act as intercessors for one another, for the community, or for the world. And I have seen this firsthand in my church, because those people love the members of that church. They will listen to you and give you their time, even though you know you're not worth it. You're not even close to them, but then they're interested in you and helping you and giving you wisdom and giving you scripture. And then I see it in the community and all the things they do for the community, like Thanksgiving meals for the people who can't afford them, kids who need toys, kids who need food on the weekend. And they also serve the world, because there was a pastor from India who came to our church and spoke about what the church has helped them in India. Man, I cannot believe how the people here can affect people in India. And it was just amazing to see that. And this is people acting on behalf of mankind. It's amazing. It's love. And where does love come from? From God Himself. Psalm 46 is a beautiful chapter on who God is, of His characteristic and His faithfulness toward us. God is our refuge and He is our strength. And in this chapter, He's talking about a river that flows out of God's throne to the city of God. And the city of God is us, and He dwells within us. And God is saying that because He is in us, we will not break. He is always, always with us. So this is where that scripture comes from. Be still and know that I am God. Because if we believe that He is God, because He is, then we believe that He is powerful and He's faithful and He's never going to forsake us, which because He won't. We can then be still and not be worried, not have anxiety. Ephesians chapter 5, 6 to 10. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not be partakers with them. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. So while God does want us to be the light in darkness, we cannot join in sinful behavior. We cannot enable them. But instead, we can pray for these places. Let's say you're going to a gathering and you know the spirits in the house. We can be in prayer for days or weeks before and pray for that dwelling. Pray that God will show up in this place, that he will take over this place with his spirit, so that the people who walk in it can feel his spirit. Man, that is so powerful, and we must believe in that. We can also ask God to remove us from these places, and only he would know if it's a danger to you or not. You know, you can trust in that as well. You can ask God these things that worries you and give it all to him, and he will know what to do, because again, in Psalm 46, he is the one who knows all things. The nations will shake, or the world will shake, but God will still be there, and he's still more powerful than anything. And the second thing is, while you can do this by yourself in your room, just with you and God, you can also ask your sisters and brothers to pray for you, the ones who know the Lord and the one who shares their wisdom with you. You can ask them to help pray for you and for the things that you are going to go through. So here is the challenge. I know that we are not perfect. I know we are going to fall short. I know the things that we are going to feel are going to affect us in some way or somehow. And sometimes these can derail us from God's will. So here is my challenge for me and you. I'm journaling these things to God and start writing these intercessions to God in the journal, so that you can see it with your eyes. Oh my gosh, this is what I have been feeling, and I'm giving it to God. And remember 2 Timothy verse 1-7 about anxiety and fear, and to not let the enemy have a foothold in this. We can't give peace if we don't have peace. So we are not source fear, because fear does not come from God. So this journal will help us get out of that middle place. We see it and we're gonna remember it. Oh yeah, I had all of this turmoil, but I'm giving it to God, and here it is. This journal can be a place of comfort between me and God, between you and God. It is a room for God and us to reside in, to intercede for the people. This song has been on repeat this past 2 weeks. It's called Make Room, and I did put it in the anxiety playlist, so you can check that out in my channel. And I will also link it in the description box below, so you can listen to it too. This song is literally laying things at Jesus's feet. It's literally surrendering to him all the things that gives you turmoil. Make room for you. I'm making room for you, God. And here it is. I'm laying it all down. Every lie, every doubt, every burden, every crown, every good and bad thing is laid on his feet. And this is the only thing that will give you peace and comfort and the confidence that you need to carry on with your life, and for you to continue to carry out the will that God has for you. This whole message is simply just interceding for the people, for God's people, for our family. And by family, I don't just mean blood. Everyone who believes in God, and for those who could believe in God and follow him. We are interceding for these people to hear and heed the voice of God, that they eventually will be also disciples of God. So the kingdom is within us, my sisters and brothers. We walk this life in unity. So do not run. Have a still heart. Do not hide, but seek the Lord. We will end this with Matthew chapter 5, 14-16. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Beautiful ending, because in all that we do and all the light that we show glorifies our Father in heaven. I hope you guys have a good week or good 2 weeks, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.